Welcome to Suspense in October, a new reading event that I've designed that I'm so excited about. This is year one, and it is celebrating Mary Stewart, the Queen of Suspense. Hi, I'm Kim, and this is an Oasis of books, and I can't wait for this reading event. In fact, even though it's for October, I am getting a little bit of a head start this week, the last week of September, and I can't wait to share it all with you right now. We're going to talk about Mary Stewart, a little bit of history about her, the types of books she's written and what she is known for, the first book she ever wrote, the first book I ever read of hers back when I was a teenager, and the simple but fun prompts for this reading event in October. Now, today is my birthday. I am 60 years old today, so yes, very vintage. And this has made me start thinking about all the books in my life that I have enjoyed over the past 6 decades. And definitely a lot of the books that I read when I was a teenager were Mary Stewart's suspense books. And they really set me on the path for mysteries and suspense books to read the rest of my life. I still enjoy them so much today. Now, tomorrow I am headed to Hawaii, where one of my daughters lives, and I am going to meet my first grandchild. He was born this past month, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him. I'll probably share a few pictures of him with you. His name is Wilder, and probably in the future I'm going to share my favorite baby board books with you. But as I travel to Hawaii, I've got some long plane trips ahead of me with some very long layovers, both going and coming back. So I'm going to take advantage of that and start reading some Mary Stewart books. Mary Stewart was also a September baby. She was born on September 17th, 1916 in England. Her name was Mary Florence Eleanor Rainbow. Isn't that great? I love that. When she was about 29, she married a Scottish geologist professor named Frederick Stewart. And when she was about 40, they moved to Scotland, which is where she lived the rest of her life until she died in May of 2014 when she was 97 years old. Now, Mary Stewart wrote 24 books in her life. Her first one was published when she was 39, her last when she was 81. Now, of those 24 books, 15 of them were suspense novels. 5 of them are set in the 5th century, centered around Merlin and the Arthurian legends, and are classified as historical and mythological fantasies. Those are not the books that we're focusing on for Suspense in October. Now, feel free to read them, but that's not what this event's about. This event's totally about the suspense. I did read, actually, the first 2 of her original Merlin trilogy, and I did like them, but that's not what I was reading Mary Stewart for. So I actually never even finished her different Arthurian legend books. So let's get back to her other books. So 15 suspense, 5 in the Arthurian legend world. What were the other 4? 3 of them were children's books, and 1 was a book of poems, which I've ordered, by the way. I can't wait to get it and read it. Also, she wrote a couple of short stories. She wrote an essay I would love to get my hands on. She wrote a ton of radio plays, which, wow, I would just love to find those someday. I haven't yet, but I did find her 2 short stories, and I've got them on order. I'll tell you more about them in a minute. So, as I mentioned, Mary Stewart is widely and very accurately proclaimed to be the Queen of Suspense. What are her suspense books most known for? Several things, actually. One would be her wonderful ability of description. She really draws you into the setting, wherever that may be, and she does love a good setting. Some of her books have a very, very Gothic feel to them and are in dark chateaus and mist-shrouded castles. And some of her books are set on gorgeous sunny islands with the characters on holiday. But wherever she sets her books, you feel like you are right there with the characters, right there in the midst of the plot. She just has this ability I have rarely seen in any other author to describe the setting almost as if she's painting it for you. Another thing Mary Stewart suspense novels are known for is the tension she creates within her stories. Now, this might come through a very chaotic, fast-paced car chase, or it might come through a long, drawn-out, gripping the edge of your seat, cat and mouse game. But however she does it, she gets you every time. Every time you feel that tension just build and build, and it's very, very scary. Now, her books, if I compare them to some of the thrillers I read nowadays, contemporary thrillers, I like a contemporary thriller that is very suspenseful, lots of tension, but doesn't have, gore and doesn't have horror elements. And it's more focused on that inner creepy, gripping tension. And that is what Mary Stewart introduced. She really pioneered the romantic Gothic suspense novel. It's not always set in a Gothic place and tone, but often it is. But it always has a mixture of mystery, adventure, romance, and tension. A third thing that Mary Stewart is known for in these suspense novels is her characters. Now, these books are by and large set in the 1950s, some in the 60s, but her characters, are in some ways part of that time period. So her women and her men do reflect a lot of the common mindsets of that time. So we have the alpha male, and we have the woman who tends to submit to him somewhat, but not always. No. Her female protagonists are a bit different, and they are what make her novels special. They are smart, they are strong, they are very, very capable and practical when they need to be. And when faced with some very difficult choices, they always choose the right way. They always choose to be responsible and do what they need to do no matter what. And it is such a wonderful thing to see. I remember reading as a teen and having my eyes open saying, yes, this is how I want my female characters to be. And of course, they still had a long way to go, but she introduced them first. Now, what she also introduced was something very common to the time period, lots and lots of smoking. Her books do have a lot of smoking, and I'm not overstating that. A lot of smoking. As long as you read it realizing, wow, they did not realize back then what smoking could do to the human body. But now we do. So, I feel that obviously if she was writing these nowadays, her characters would not smoke, but they did. And, they do lend an element of sophistication to her characters. Anyway, there is smoking involved, just so you know. Another very much appreciated element to Mary Stewart's writing are her literary references. Her books are filled with fascinating literary references, quotes and inferences, allusions of all kinds. And it is so fun to read them and catch them. You feel so smart. But also just they make her writing, her stories come alive in ways you might not have thought of on your own when she draws these elements into them. She also, in almost all of her books, it will be interesting for me to go back and look and see, is it all of them? I'm not positive, but in most of them at least, she starts every chapter with an interesting quote. And those are always fun to read too. They're somewhat related to the chapter and also just reminding you of other great works you want to read or have read. Very cool. Finally, I would say that in many of her novels, she includes elements of lovable animals. And this is true to who Mary Stewart was as a person. She did love animals. She loved nature of all kinds. And it's very nice to see those animals included in many of her stories as pets or animals out in the wild, dolphins and such. A very nice addition to her stories. The first book that Mary Stewart ever published was in 1955 entitled Madam, Will You Talk? And it was set in 1955, and it was set in Provence, France. And the protagonist was Charity. She was a widow, her husband having died in World War II. And she was, very much into literature and art, and she went on holiday. And while there, she met a 13-year-old boy named David who seemed very upset, basically, very withdrawn and upset. And she befriended him, and she found out why he was acting the way he was. He had been the witness to a murder, but it seemed that he had been knocked unconscious and hadn't actually seen anything. But did the murderer know that? Was the murderer sure of that? Perhaps not, because someone was after David, trying to get to him, trying to kidnap him, maybe trying to kill him. And Charity was not about to let that happen. Now, this novel, Madam, Will You Talk, really garnered a ton of praise for Mary Stewart because it was her debut novel, and yet right away it was widely acclaimed as the pioneer of the modern romantic suspense novel. And it is very much remembered for its very fast-paced, very tension-filled car chase scene where the protagonist is driving like, a NASCAR race driver, getting away from these dangerous men trying to protect the young boy. And of course, there's some romance involved and a lot of plot twists, and I'm not going to spoil anything. Now, the first book I ever read of Mary Stewart's is one of her most famous, for sure. It is 9 Coaches Waiting. Now, 9 Coaches Waiting was published in 1958 and set in the late 50s in the French Alps. This was the book where Mary Stewart introduced the hugely Gothic aura to her suspense novel, because the chateau that our protagonist finds herself at as a governess is very, very Gothic. The ambiance that just envelops the entire tale feels like it's straight out of, Rebecca or Jane Eyre. In fact, 9 Coaches Waiting does allude to Jane Eyre in several ways. And I know that when I read it as a teenager, that thrilled me because Jane Eyre was one of my top 3 favorite books back then. It might even still be today. And 9 Coaches Waiting just has many similarities. So yes, the protagonist, Linda Martin, goes to this French chateau after being hired as a governess for the 9-year-old boy, Philippe. Now, Philippe is an orphan, and he's living in the chateau with his uncle Leon and his wife Heloise. And Linda was also an orphan, so she really bonds with Philippe. Now, Philippe has another uncle also, and Leon's son shows up, Raoul. And, well, there is something dangerous going on. Once again, the protagonist has to step in and protect this child. Now, I will say, as far as a child in peril goes as a theme for Mary Stewart, she does use it several times, but not always. And it never goes too far. I won't read a child in peril book where the child actually is harmed, or even where you truly feel he's about to be harmed. But there's just enough of that threat here to make it feel authentic and to make you really admire the heroine as she makes the choices she does to put the child first rather than herself. Now, some people remark on the fact that Mary Stewart's books basically have insta-love in them in one way or another. Partially, it's like, well, how can you really help that? You're in this very short period of time where this adventure, this mystery is taking place. So if you're going to have a romance, it's going to have to happen in a short amount of time. But also, I think the reason it works so well for Mary Stewart is because she was writing from experience. She experienced herself insta-love. She fell in love with her husband the minute she met him and later found out he also did the same with her. And they were engaged within a month or two and married within a few more months. So, their happily ever after marriage lasted for many, many, many decades until her husband died. And I could see why she didn't have a problem writing these romances so well. More of a problem is that the men she's falling for often you think might be the murderer. maybe even they sometimes are. I guess you'll have to read to find out. Now, if you're lucky, when you go looking for your Mary Stewart books, you might find one of the original covers like this one for Nine Coaches Waiting. Just look at that. You can see the protagonist there in the front, Linda Martin, hiding behind the tree. You can see the hulking figure there in the background and the chateau. I just love this artwork. However, I will say I actually have a new copy of Nine Coaches Waiting, and I like this cover too. Another favorite of mine from my teenage years was Wildfire at Midnight. Here's another original cover. Isn't it awesome? So this book was published in 1956, and it's set in 1953 on the Isle of Skye in Scotland. So this is the Scottish Highlands, lots of mountains there. And the protagonist is Gianetta. Gianetta was a fashion model, and she left London to go take a break on the Isle of Skye because the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II was happening, and London was full of tourists and so crowded. She thought she'd, get away. Now, it just so happened at the same time, the Hillary expedition was going on where the British were attempting to climb Mount Everest. And that is referred to a few times in this novel because there are mountain climbers on the Isle of Skye climbing the mountains there. And there are murders. So Gianetta's vacation doesn't turn out like she thinks it's going to. It's actually not relaxing at all. There are some ritual type murders going on, and it is Mary Stewart's one of, if not the only, closed circle type mystery, which she wrote about later that, she thought she'd try it, and most people think she did a fantastic job of it, by the way, but she decided she had to focus so much more on the plot than on the characters that going forward she was not going to do that anymore because she really liked making the main focus be the characters, which I still think she did a great job of here. So these hotel guests, they are both the suspects for being the murderer and, well, the potential murderees, the potential victims. And one of those guests turns out to be Gianetta's ex-husband, which is quite awkward. And of course, it turns out he might be the one who's doing the murdering. Yeah. Very, very tense chase scene also out in the mist-covered mountainsides as Gianetta tries to get away from the murderer. Another one of my favorite Mary Stewart romantic suspense novels is My Brother Michael. This was published in 1959 and set in Greece. Amazing cover, right? So in this one, Camilla is the protagonist, and she meets up with Simon, who he's there investigating his brother Michael's death. His brother died during World War II, and it turns out he had been working with the Greek resistance. And just before he died, he had written a cryptic letter which spoke of a significant discovery on Mount Parnassus. And so Simon wants to figure out what really happened, why did his brother die, and what was this significant discovery. And so in this book, we see how both ancient history and the more recent World War II events can still affect the present. And again, still tons and tons of suspense involved. So much tension, so much adventure. Another great one. And the last favorite book of Mary Stewart's I'm going to share with you today is Touch Not the Cat. Now, this is not the original copy that I had, I don't think. I seem to remember a different cover, and I'm going to look into that. But this is very much a 70s cover. This was published in 1976, and I read it just a couple of years after it came out. Now, this book, just as much tension, just as much suspense, just as great of a female protagonist, but it is a little different. This is the first Mary Stewart book that has an element of the paranormal to it. And that's because the main character, Bryony, in addition to inheriting the family estate, Ashley Court, when her father mysteriously dies, she also has inherited a family trait, which is the ability to communicate telepathically in a somewhat limited way. And the person that she has been communicating with telepathically for quite a while is a mysterious lover whom she will perhaps eventually meet. We shall see. In any case, when she finds out that her father has died, she goes back to her family estate and she discovers that his death was perhaps not natural. She discovers that there is a family curse, actually, and she discovers that some of her cousins are trying to take the property and use it to their advantage, and they're being very devious and perhaps dangerous about it. So this novel has a bit of a different feel to it, but yet it's still that same level of high quality, wonderful writing from Mary Stewart. So what is my potential pile of possibilities for suspense in October, celebrating Mary Stewart, the Queen of Suspense? Well, I would love to reread some of my favorites, but I am definitely going to read some. There are a few that I've never read before, or at least that I have no memory of reading. I was very young, and that was a long time ago. So I have here 2 Mary Stewart books, which I picked up used recently, Rose Cottage and Thornyhold. These are some of Mary Stewart's later published books, and I definitely want to read them. And I just yesterday, with some birthday money from my father, ordered used a few more titles from Mary Stewart. One is The Ivy Tree. The other is her first book that we talked about, Madam, Will You Talk? So I'm going to read those 2, I think, for sure, too. But I also found her book of poetry and ordered it. And I found a dual book. It has her one novella, which is The Winds Off the Small Isles. Is that what it is? Yes, The Wind Off the Small Isles. It's set in the Canary Islands. And its main character, Perdita, gets trapped in an underwater cave. And then included in that book with that novella is one of Mary Stewart's 2 short stories. It's called The Lost One, and the protagonist is Perdita, the same female protagonist from this novella. So it's wonderful that they put the 2 together, and I can't wait to read them. So that's 4 novels, a book of poetry, a novella and a short story, and maybe reread a few of my favorites. We shall see what happens, but I can't wait to get started when I get on the plane tomorrow. Now, what are the 2 prompts for suspense in October? Number 1, read a Mary Stewart novel, a suspense novel that you have never read before. Now, if you have read them all, I give you permission and approval and encouragement to read either one of her historical, mythological Merlin books, or you could also read her book of poems, maybe her novella or short story. Maybe even you can find some of her children books. Or you also have my full permission and approval to reread, because that is always so much fun. You can pick out a favorite or 2 and really enjoy getting back into them. What is the second prompt? Well, it's pretty important and pretty simple. It is to share the book or books you read of Mary Stewart's with others, whether that is just people around you in your life, telling them about this great book you just read, this great author from the past who they would so much probably enjoy reading today. Or if you're a content creator here on YouTube, make a video telling us what you read and what you thought of the books you read. That would be awesome. Now, once I get back from Hawaii, I'm definitely planning to do several more videos focused on Mary Stewart and her amazing books. I'm going to talk about some of her other wonderful heroines. I'm going to tell you what I think of her poetry and her short stories. And I'm going to talk about the great moments of suspense, share some great quotes from across many, many of her books. Talk a little bit more about Mary Stewart herself and how her books stemmed from her own life experiences, and just, share with you my love and fascination for Mary Stewart and, well, all things related to her. So I hope this has struck a chord with some of you, those of you who already know and love Mary Stewart, those of you who maybe read one book from her in the past and now remember and say, hey, yeah, I actually think I really enjoyed that book. Let me give her a try again. And those of you who've never even heard of her, please do yourself a favor. Get involved with this event and read at least one Mary Stewart book in October. Until next time, I'm wishing you all some wonderful, happy, suspenseful reading throughout October.